Egyptian World Cup celebrations turned chaotic in London as fans clashed with police, climbed double-decker buses, and hit-and-run leaves man injured. Thousands of jubilant Egyptian football fans flooded London's Edgware Road on Friday night after Egypt secured a historic FIFA World Cup victory over Australia. Now let's take a deeper look and uncover every layer of this story on our AI
Imagine for a
podcast.
second, right, that you're just walking down the street.
Okay.
It's a Friday night in central London. You've just stepped out of a cafe, you're buttoning up your coat, maybe checking your phone real quick, and then you look up and the street in front of you has just completely vanished.
Like, vanished, like entirely.
Yeah, like the asphalt is just gone. And in its place is this surging, moving sea of about 1,000 screaming, singing, wildly energetic people.
Oh, wow.
Right. Traffic is entirely blocked. The noise is just absolutely deafening. And in that split second, your brain has to make a very quick calculation. Are you walking into a full-scale riot, or are you looking at, the absolute greatest party on earth?
That's the ultimate urban Rorschach test, really.
Okay, got it.
Because depending on where you're standing, both physically and emotionally, you can make a pretty compelling case for either one.
You really could. And that exact scenario is basically the foundation for our discussion today. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're looking at the events detailed in a news report titled Chaos and Celebration, Egypt's Historic Victory on Edgware Road. And our mission here is to sort of dissect the anatomy of a spontaneous mega crowd. We're going to explore how this outpouring of pure historic joy in a London neighborhood instantly transformed into, a massive public safety hazard.
Yeah, a really volatile situation.
So, okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand the chaos that took over the streets of London, we first have to understand the sheer magnitude of the spark that ignited it. And that spark was a football match on the global stage.
Yes, but I think we really need to emphasize that this was not just another game on the calendar.
Right.
What's fascinating here is that this was a psychological pressure cooker that had been building pressure for, almost a century. The catalyst was Egypt defeating Australia 4-2 in a fiercely contested penalty shootout.
Right. And if you follow football, a penalty shootout is already, the most nerve-wracking way a game can possibly end.
Oh, absolutely. It's brutal.
It is. It's pure manufactured anxiety. You strip away all the complex strategies, and it just comes down to one person kicking a ball at another person. But the context of this specific shootout is staggering. This victory secured Egypt's first ever World Cup knockout win since 1934.
Which is it's hard to even wrap your head around.
Think about that for a second. 1934. That is not a drought. That is a literal lifetime. You have multiple generations of fans who lived, grew old, and passed away without ever seeing their national team win a single knockout game on the stage.
It completely changes the stakes of the event.
Yeah.
We are looking at over 9 decades of accumulated anticipation.
And it secured their place in the round of 16, where they're actually set to face either Argentina or Cape Verde next.
Right.
But beyond just Egypt, this is a massive milestone for African football as a whole, too. Because by winning this game, Egypt joined Morocco, making this the very first World Cup in history where 2 African nations have recorded knockout stage victories in the same tournament.
Wow.
So it's not just national pride, right? It's continental history being made in real time.
Which totally explains the visceral emotional reactions we saw on the pitch. You had Egypt's captain, Mohamed Salah, just completely overcome with emotion, weeping on the field.
Yeah, that footage was intense.
Right, because the psychological weight of carrying a 90-year national burden and a historic continental milestone had suddenly just been lifted off his shoulders. And you contrast that with the Australian side, who had just suffered their 3rd consecutive World Cup knockout defeat.
Oh, that's rough.
It is. The despair on one side and the absolute euphoria on the other creates this massive emotional differential. When a 90-year tension finally snaps, the release of energy is just seismic.
And that seismic energy, it doesn't just stay in the stadium.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just stay in Egypt either. For the Egyptian diaspora, it radiated outward across the globe, which brings us directly back to Edgware Road in London.
Yes.
If you know that area, you know it's affectionately called Little Cairo. It's home to one of the largest Egyptian and Arab communities in the entire UK.
It's a huge cultural hub.
Exactly. The neighborhood is packed with Middle Eastern restaurants, cafes, shisha lounges. So on that Friday night, those venues were absolutely overflowing with fans watching the match together.
Right. It's a geographical focal point. So when that final whistle blew, The celebration just instantly spilled out of those doorways and right into the busy roadway.
Okay, but here's where I want to push back a little, or at least ask a question that I think a lot of people have when they see footage of these massive street celebrations.
Sure.
I just struggle to understand why fans feel the need to literally stop traffic. I mean, you're in a neighborhood full of cafes, you're a short walk from major parks like Hyde Park. Why do 1,000 people instinctively decide, yes, let's go stand right in the middle of a major arterial road where buses are trying to drive? It seems so counterintuitive.
It does, yeah, if you look at it purely logistically. But you have to look at it through the lens of human behavioral psychology. Specifically, there's a concept called collective effervescence.
Elective effervescence.
Yeah, it's a term sociologists use to describe what happens when a community comes together and sort of simultaneously communicates the same thought and participates in the same action.
So they basically stop being individuals and start becoming like a single entity.
Precisely. When an event transcends the individual, when it goes from my team won a game to our nation made history after a century of waiting, the human brain instinctively seeks out a visible collective space to validate that shared experience. Think about it. A cafe only holds, what, 50 people? A living room holds 10. So when you have a collective emotional overflow of 1,000 people, the physical space has to expand to match the psychological scale of the moment. Urban infrastructure, the streets, the intersections, is really the only space immediately available that's large enough to hold that much collective joy.
So they aren't, like, trying to be a nuisance.
No, not at all. The crowd isn't maliciously trying to block traffic. They are unintentionally reclaiming the urban infrastructure to physically manifest the size of their shared emotion.
That makes a lot of sense, but it also sounds incredibly precarious.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you reclaim that infrastructure, the nature of the gathering has to change, right?
Exactly. It shifts entirely.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. It's like adding a catalyst to a chemical mixture. You add 1,000 people to a confined street, and the atmosphere fundamentally mutates from a party into a highly volatile situation.
Very volatile.
The street turned into this literal sea of Egyptian flags, football shirts, people blaring their car horns. People were weaving through stationary traffic. Fans actually climbed up onto the roof of a double-decker bus to wave flags and sing patriotic songs.
Which is a perfect illustration of how individual risk assessment just vanishes in a crowd.
Right, because normally a rational adult does not look at a double-decker bus in moving traffic and think, yeah, I should scale that.
No, never. And this is where we have to look at the mechanics of crowd contagion. Have you ever seen a massive flock of birds moving together in the sky?
Yeah, like a murmuration.
Exactly. They dart and change direction in perfect unison. That happens because of a flocking algorithm.
Yeah.
An individual bird isn't looking at the final destination. It's only reacting to the movement of the bird immediately next to it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Human crowds operate on a very similar mechanism when adrenaline is high. The anonymity of the crowd strips away your normal personal inhibitions. You stop making independent, rational choices and start reacting to the energy right next to you.
So if the person next to you is screaming...
You scream. If a few people climb a bus, suddenly climbing a bus just seems like the accepted norm of the environment.
So the entire group is essentially operating on this shared lowered inhibition.
Precisely.
Which totally explains why the Metropolitan Police were called at exactly 9:57 p.m. on that Friday, July 3rd, specifically for reports of disorder.
Right. The energy shifted.
It did. The situation escalated. We went from pure joy to something with a much sharper edge. There was video footage from the scene showing 2 police officers physically wrestling with a shirtless supporter right there in the middle of the street.
Yeah, that was intense.
And while they're wrestling this guy, the crowd is gathering around, shouting, and actively trying to pull the man away from the police.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that right there is the tipping point. The shared reality of the crowd shifted from celebrating a sports victory to actively resisting authority. The police presence, which is just intending to restore order, inadvertently provides a common antagonist for this highly energized group.
And what's fascinating to me is how the focus of the crowd started to splinter in that highly charged atmosphere. Like, it wasn't strictly about football anymore.
No, it evolved.
Amidst all the music and the celebration, political chants of Free Palestine began echoing through sections of the gathering.
Right.
So you have this intense, swirling mix happening all at once on one street. A 90-year sports victory, people scaling public transit, physical confrontations with law enforcement, and these deeply held geopolitical expressions. It's just a massive collision of different energies.
It really is. And when you look at the underlying mechanics of large gatherings, they act as massive magnets for broader cultural grievances. When you have a gathering of that size operating on pure adrenaline, it takes on a life entirely of its own.
Yeah.
The initial unifying reason for the Gathering Egypt advancing to the knockout stage creates the venue, right?
Yeah.
But once that venue exists, people use that platform to vocalize other deeply held beliefs. The boundary between a sports celebration, a political rally, and a kind of joyful rebellion becomes completely blurred, testing the absolute limits of public order.
And unfortunately, testing those limits in an environment designed for heavy vehicles inevitably leads to severe physical danger.
Absolutely.
We're talking about a volatile crowd occupying a busy London roadway, and that volatility boiled over. A severe hit and run actually occurred right in the middle of the crowd.
Yeah, that was terrifying.
A gray SUV drove through a section of the gathering, literally moving through the supporters, before it struck a 41-year-old man who was carrying a backpack as he was crossing the road, and the impact knocked him completely motionless to the ground.
It's just a horrific scenario. And the driver did not stop. They fled the scene entirely, which prompted bystanders to rush in, lift the injured man, and even attempt to chase down the SUV on foot.
Wow.
The victim ended up being hospitalized with a suspected broken arm.
Okay, so this brings me to a major point of confusion, and I really need you to explain this to me. Because when I look at the facts of this night, I'm honestly stunned by the police response.
Okay, how so?
Well, you have a massive crowd of 1,000 people shutting down a major road. You have a violent hit and run where a man is left motionless in the street. You have officers physically fighting a shirtless fan while a crowd tries to pull him away. And yet, the Met Police successfully dispersed the crowd but made absolutely zero arrests at the scene, not a single one.
Right, 0 arrests on the night.
How is that possible? Like, wait, doesn't making 0 arrests just signal to the crowd that they have total impunity? Aren't the police essentially surrendering the streets to mob rule by not enforcing the law in that moment?
This raises an important question, and it's a very natural reaction. It highlights the massive gap between public expectation and tactical reality. We are conditioned to believe that if a crime happens, like assaulting an officer or a hit and run, someone gets put in handcuffs right then and there to prove the law is working.
Yeah, exactly.
But from a public order policing standpoint, stepping into a volatile crowd of 1,000 people to make an arrest is arguably the most dangerous action an officer can take.
Wait, really? More dangerous than just letting a suspect walk away?
Absolutely. Let's break down the mechanics of the situation. The police are outnumbered by 1,000 to 1. The crowd is highly emotional, highly energetic, and as we saw with the shirtless man, already demonstrating anti-police friction.
Wait, they were already pulling him away.
Right. So if an officer attempts to forcefully make an arrest, what happens to that flocking algorithm we talked about? The crowd stops focusing on the celebration and instantly focuses their collective aggression on the officer.
They swarm.
They swarm. A single arrest in the center of a dense crowd acts as a flashpoint. It can trigger a crush, a panic, or a full-blown riot where dozens of people, including officers and innocent bystanders, could be severely injured or killed.
Oh, I see.
So the modern policing strategy here is built on strict, calculated prioritization. The primary tactical objective is not immediate punitive justice. The primary objective is de-escalation and safe dispersal. The police prioritize clearing the street, getting that injured 41-year-old man to paramedics, and neutralizing the immediate physical danger of 1,000 people standing in active traffic.
So it isn't impunity, it's basically a tactical retreat to prevent a much larger catastrophe.
Precisely. Because they have another extremely powerful tool at their disposal that doesn't require risking a riot post-incident investigation.
Oh, right, the cameras.
Exactly. London is one of the most surveilled cities on the planet. The police are relying heavily on CCTV footage, body cameras, and witness videos. The tactical protocol is just to wait. Once the adrenaline has faded, once the street is empty, and the danger of a mass casualty event has passed, detectives can calmly sit in a control room and review the high-definition cameras.
That makes so much sense.
They can run the license plate of the gray SUV. They can identify the people who assaulted the officers. They delay the physical confrontation to ensure public safety in the moment, knowing they can make the arrests on a quiet Tuesday morning instead of a chaotic Friday night.
That completely reframes how I view crowd control. It isn't about winning the fight in the street, it's about managing the temperature of the crowd so that the street simply survives the night.
Exactly.
And that brings us back to why this specific event on Edgware Road matters so much to you, the listener. Because we have all found ourselves in massive crowds. You've probably been in a shoulder-to-shoulder crowd leaving a stadium or pushing through a packed train station after a major event.
We all have.
And it is so easy to just get swept up in the energy, to feel the joy and hear the singing. But the anatomy of this mega crowd is a masterclass in how rapidly everyday environments can radically shift.
It requires a real shift in awareness. Understanding the mechanics of a crowd means recognizing the complex tightrope being walked between a historic cultural milestone and a severe public safety emergency. It's never just a party. It's always a highly complex organism that requires constant, careful management.
Exactly. The next time you see one of these massive street gatherings, you won't just look at the fans cheering on top of a bus. You'll look at the entire ecosystem. You'll see the flocking algorithm in action. You'll look at the police officers standing on the perimeter, managing that invisible tightrope, intentionally choosing de-escalation over confrontation to prevent a riot. You will see the sheer kinetic energy of a community that has waited 90 years to finally exhale.
Beautifully put.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final piece of this puzzle that really sticks with me. It's a perspective shift that I think you should mull over long after you finish listening to this.
And it centers entirely on that hit-and-run incident with the gray SUV.
Right.
When we hear the term hit and run in the context of a massive crowd, our minds almost instinctively jump to a malicious act. We picture an aggressive driver intentionally deciding to plow their vehicle through a group of people.
Because it happens.
It does, and that is a very real possibility here. The police are actively investigating it with CCTV to determine exactly what criminal offenses were committed. But to truly understand the chaotic reality of Edgware Road that night, you have to consider the alternative perspective of the person behind the wheel of that SUV.
Put yourself in the driver's seat for a second.
Imagine you are just an everyday person trying to navigate your way home on a Friday night. You turn your car onto Edgware Road, expecting the usual London traffic, and without any warning, the world outside your windshield just explodes.
Yeah.
Suddenly, you are completely surrounded, 1,000 screaming, jumping people, flags waving, people banging on the hoods of cars, individuals scaling double-decker buses. Every single physical exit is totally blocked by bodies.
That sounds terrifying.
You're trapped inside a metal box, completely immobilized by a massive, unpredictable organism. Did that driver strike that man out of malice? Or did they experience a pure, visceral panic?
Wow.
Were they an outsider who suddenly felt terrified and threatened by a screaming mob, and in a moment of sheer fight-or-flight terror, they just stepped on the gas to escape what they perceived as an imminent threat?
It is a profoundly unsettling question about how two different people can experience the exact same event in radically different ways. Where exactly is the line between a joyful, historic celebration to the people inside the crowd and a terrifying, life-threatening situation to the people who are just trying to pass through it? It really is the ultimate urban Rorschach test.
It really challenges our assumptions about intent and chaos in public spaces.
It certainly does. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking the hard questions, keep looking at the underlying mechanisms behind the news, and we will catch you next time.
Okay, one question for you. Do you think passionate football celebrations can ever justify blocking major roads, climbing public transport, and disrupting emergency services, or should authorities take stricter actions regardless of the occasion? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.